Hi everybody. Welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story while you work or doze. So, sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea. Tonight we jump back into Erin Hunter's Fire and Ice, the second book of the Warrior series. Chapter 22. The days leading up to the next full moon dragged by slowly for Fireheart. It already seemed ages since the last gathering. Rain clouds had kept the moon covered the last time, and the clans had stayed away from Four Trees. Meanwhile, patrol after patrol reported scenting River Clan warriors at Sunning Rocks, and Shadow Clan scent had been discovered again by the Owl Tree. When he wasn't hunting or patrolling, Fireheart divided his time between Cloudkit, Cinderpaw, and Brackenpaw. Even though Greystripe had resumed his role as Brackenpaw's mentor, Fireheart soon began to notice the young apprentice at loose ends from time to time, his mentor nowhere in sight. Hunting was all Brackenpaw would say when Fireheart asked where Greystripe had gone. "Why didn't you go with him?" meowed Fireheart. "He said I could go tomorrow." Fireheart felt the usual prickle of anger at Greystripe's stubbornness, but he shrugged it away. He'd given up trying to make Greystripe see sense. They'd hardly spoken since Fireheart had brought Cloudkit into the camp. But he made an effort to take Brackenpaw out whenever Greystripe went missing, just to keep the apprentice out of sight. Fireheart knew that Tigerclaw wouldn't accept Brackenpaw's answer so easily. Finally, the full moon appeared in a cloudless sky. Fireheart came back from hunting early. He passed the fallen oak, deserted now that Swiftpaw and Speckletail's kit had recovered. He dropped his catch on the pile and headed toward Yellowfang's den to visit Cinderpaw. Even the threat of Greencough had left the camp. For now, only Cinderpaw remained with the medicine cat. As Fireheart padded through the tunnel, he could see the small gray she-cat in the clearing ahead. She was helping Yellowfang prepare some herbs. Fireheart winced as he watched Cinderpaw limp heavily toward the split rock with a mouthful of dried leaves. "Fireheart!" Cinderpaw spat out the herbs and turned to greet him as he emerged from the tunnel. I can only just sent you through these disgusting things." "Those disgusting things helped cure your leg," growled Yellowfang. "Well, you should have used more," retorted Cinderpaw. But Fireheart was relieved to see she had a mischievous glint in her eye. "Look at this!" She twitched her twisted hind leg. "I can hardly reach my claws to wash them. Perhaps I should give you a few more exercises to loosen it up," meowed Yellowfang. "No thanks," mewed Cinderpaw quickly. "They hurt." "They're meant to hurt. It shows they're working." The old medicine cat turned to Fireheart. "Perhaps you'll have more luck persuading her to do them. I'm going into the forest to dig up some comfrey roots." "I'll try," Fireheart promised as Yellowfang padded past him. "You'll know if she's doing them right," the medicine cat called over her shoulder, "because she'll complain." Cinderpaw limped over to Fireheart and touched her nose to his. "Thanks for coming to see me." She sat down and grimaced as she tucked her bad leg under her. "I like coming to see you," Fireheart purred. "I missed our training sessions." He regretted his words as soon as he'd uttered them. A wistful look clouded Cinderpaw's eyes. "Me too," she meowed. "When do you think I'll be able to start again?" Fireheart stared at her, his heart sinking. Clearly, Yellowfang hadn't told her yet that she would never be a warrior. "Perhaps if we try some of your exercises, it'll help," he meowed evasively. "Okay," mewed Cinderpaw, "but just a few." She lay on her side and stretched out her leg till her face was twisted with pain. Slowly, her teeth clenched, she began to move it backward and forward. "You're doing really well," Fireheart meowed, hiding the sorrow that lay like a rock in his stomach. Cinderpaw let her leg drop and lay still for a moment. Then she pushed herself up. Fireheart watched her quietly as she shook her head. I'm never going to be a warrior, am I? Fireheart couldn't lie to her. No, he whispered. I'm so sorry. He stretched his muzzle towards her and licked her head. After a few moments, she gave a long sigh and lay down again. I knew it really, she mewed. It's just that sometimes I dream about being in the forest, hunting with Rockinpaw, and then I wake up and the pain in my leg reminds me I'll never hunt again. It feels too much to bear. I have to pretend that maybe one day I'll be able to hunt. Fireheart couldn't bear to see her in such low spirits. I'll take you out into the forest again, he promised. We'll find the oldest, slowest mouse in the woods. It won't stand a chance against you. Cinderpaw looked at him and purred gratefully. Fireheart purred back at her, but there was a question that had been nagging at him since the accident. Cinderpaw, he began, can you remember what happened when the monster hit you? Was Tigerclaw there? Cinderpaw's eyes clouded with confusion. I don't know, she stammered. Fireheart felt a pang of guilt as he saw her flinch away from the memory. I went straight to the burned ash where Dustpaw said Tigerclaw would be, and then there was the monster, and I don't really remember. You wouldn't have realized how thin the verge was there. Fireheart shook his head slowly. You must have just run straight onto the thunder path. Why wasn't Tigerclaw where he said he'd be? He thought, with a flash of rage. He could have stopped her from running out. Princess's words rang ominously in his head. Was it a trap? He pictured Tigerclaw crouching downwind, hidden among the trees, staring out at the verge, waiting. How's Cloudkit? Cinderpaw's mew cut short his thoughts. She clearly wanted to change the subject. Fireheart was happy to oblige, especially if it meant talking about Princess's son. Getting bigger every day, he meowed proudly. I'm dying to meet him. When are you going to bring him to visit me? As soon as Brindleface lets me, Fireheart answered. She won't let him out of her sight at the moment. She likes him then? She treats him just like her other kids, Fireheart meowed. Thanks, StarClan. To be honest, I wasn't sure if she'd take to him. He looks so different from her other kits. Even Fireheart couldn't deny that Cloudkit's snowy pelt of soft fur looked out of place beside the other kits, with the forest-colored coats of short, mottled fur. At least he gets on well with his nursery mates, Fireheart's voice trailed away. He stared at the ground, feeling a twinge of anxiety. What's the matter? Cinderpaw prompted gently. Fireheart shrugged. I'm just sick of the way some of the other cats look at him, like he's stupid or worthless. Does Cloudkit notice these looks? Fireheart shook his head. Well, don't worry then, Cinderpaw mewed, but Cloudkit doesn't even know he was born a kitty pet. I think he just assumes he's from a different clan. But if they keep giving him these dirty looks, he's going to realize there's something wrong with him. Fireheart looked at his paws fretfully. Something wrong with him? Echoed Cinderpaw in wonder. You were born a kitty pet, and there's nothing wrong with you. Look, by the time Cloudkit works out where he comes from, he'll be able to start proving that a kitty pet can be as good as any clan-born warrior, just like you've done. What if someone tells him before he's ready? If he's anything like you, he was born ready. When did you get so smart? Fireheart meowed, rather surprised by his apprentice's sharpness. Cinderpaw rolled onto her back with a dramatic moan. Suffering can do that to a cat. Fireheart prodded her stomach with a paw, and Cinderpaw squeaked before scrambling back onto her side. Oh, really, she mewed. Look who I've been hanging out with lately. Fireheart tipped his head on one side questioningly. Yellowfang, you dope. Cinderpaw scoffed. She's one sharp old cat. I'm learning a lot. She sat up. Yellowfang said there's a gathering tonight. Are you going? I don't know, Fireheart admitted. I'm going to ask Bluestar later. I'm not exactly popular with the clan at the moment. They'll get over it, Cinderpaw promised. She nudged his shoulder. Shouldn't you go and find out if you're going then? They'll be leaving soon. You're right, Fireheart replied. Will you be okay until Yellowfang gets back? Do you want me to fetch you some fresh kill? I'll be fine, Cinderpaw assured him, and Yellowfang will bring me something. She always does. I'm going to be the fattest cat in the clan by the time she's finished with me. Fireheart felt a burst of happiness to see his former apprentice recovering her spirit. He was tempted to stay and keep her company, but she was right. He should find out if he could go to the gathering. I'll see you tomorrow, then, he meowed. There should be plenty of news from the gathering. Yeah, and I want to hear it all, Cinderpaw mewed. Make sure Bluestar lets you go, quick. I'm going. Fireheart retorted, getting to his paws. Bye, Cinderpaw. Bye. Fireheart stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked around for Bluestar. She was talking to Willowpelt outside her den. Fireheart reached them just as Willowpelt stood up to leave. The slender gray warrior nodded to Fireheart as she padded away. Bluestar gazed at Fireheart with knowing eyes. You want to go to the gathering? She meowed. Fireheart opened his mouth to speak, but Bluestar interrupted him. All the warriors want to go tonight, but I can't take every cat. Fireheart felt disappointed. I wanted to see WindClan again, he explained, to find out how they've been getting on since Graystripe and I brought them home. Bluestar narrowed her eyes. I don't need reminding of what you did for WindClan, she meowed sharply, and Fireheart flinched. But you're right to be concerned. Bluestar went on. You and Graystripe may come to the gathering tonight. Thank you, Bluestar, Fireheart meowed. It'll be an interesting gathering, Bluestar warned him. RiverClan and ShadowClan have much to explain. Fireheart felt his ears twitch nervously, but he couldn't help feeling a thrill of excitement as well. Bluestar clearly meant to challenge Crooked Star and Nightstar about their invasions into ThunderClan territory. He dipped his head respectfully to Bluestar and patted away. As he collected 2 rolls for Brindleface from the pile of fresh kill, Fireheart noticed Yellowfang trudging into the camp. Her paws were muddy, and her mouth was crammed with fat, knobbly roots. Her search for comfrey had clearly been successful. Fireheart carried the fresh kill over to the nursery. Brindleface was curled up inside, feeding Cloudkit. The other kits had recently given up their mother's milk, and soon Cloudkit too would have his first taste of fresh kill. Brindleface looked up as he entered, her eyes shadowed with concern. I've just sent for Yellowfang, she mewed. Fireheart was instantly alarmed. There's something wrong with Cloudkit. He's been a little feverish today. Brindleface leaned down and licked the kit's head as he stopped feeding and began squirming restlessly. It's probably nothing, but I thought I'd see what Yellowfang thought. I don't want to take any chances. Fireheart remembered that the Dappled Queen had recently lost a kit, and he hoped she was just being overcautious. But Cloudkit did look uncomfortable. I'll come and see you after the gathering, he promised. He ducked out of the nursery and headed back to the pile of fresh kill to pick out his own food. Brindleface's news had spoiled his appetite, but he knew he should eat something before the journey to Four Trees tonight. Longtail and Dustpaw were already standing over the pile. Fireheart sat down and waited for them to leave. Haven't you seen the cloud chick today? Meowed Longtail. Fireheart felt a familiar ripple of frustration at Longtail's snide comment. He's probably realized how silly he looks and decided to hide in the nursery, mused Dustpaw. I'd like to be there when he tries hunting for the first time. The prey will spot him coming a tree lengths away with that white fluff, Longtail sneered. Unless they mistake him for a puffball mushroom. Dustpaw's whiskers twitched as he threw a sideways glance at Fireheart. Fireheart flattened his ears and looked away. He watched Yellowfang hurry into the nursery with a mouthful of feverfew. Unfortunately, Longtail and Dustpaw noticed too. Looks like the kitty pet's caught, but chill. What a surprise, meowed Longtail. Goldenflower was right. He won't last through Leaf Bear. The tabby warrior turned and stared at Fireheart, waiting for a reaction, but Fireheart ignored him and walked over to the fresh kill pile. He chose a thrush and carried it away to eat, feeling drained by the endless spite. Graystripe was sharing his meal with Running Wind by the nettle clump. Hi, did you have a good hunt? Running Wind called at Fireheart passed. Yes, thanks. Fireheart replied. Graystripe didn't look up. Bluestar said you could go to the gathering, Fireheart told Graystripe. I know, Graystripe answered, still chewing. Are you going? Fireheart turned to Running Wind. You bet, I wouldn't miss this one for anything. Fireheart padded on and found a quiet spot at the edge of the clearing. Longtail's words echoed in his head. Would the clan ever accept the little white kit? Fireheart closed his eyes and began to wash himself. As he turned to lick his side, his whiskers brushed against something. He opened his eyes to find Sandpaw standing beside him. Her orange pelt glowed silver beneath the rising moon. Thought you might like some company, she mewed. She sat down and began to wash Fireheart's back with long, soothing strokes. Through half-closed eyes, Fireheart caught a glimpse of Dustpaw staring from outside the apprentice's den, unable to disguise his envy and amazement. Dustpaw wasn't the only one surprised by Sandpaw's gesture. Fireheart hadn't expected such friendliness from the fiery young she-cat, but her warmth was welcome, and he wasn't going to question it. "Are you going to the gathering?" he asked. Sandpaw paused. "Yes, you?" "Yes, I think Blue Star is going to challenge Crooked Star and Night Star about their hunting." He waited for Sandpaw to reply, but she was staring up at the darkening sky. "I wish I was going as a warrior," she murmured. Fireheart tensed, but for once there was no hint of jealousy or bitterness in her mew. Fireheart felt awkward. He knew his training had started after Sandpaw's, and he had been a warrior for more than 2 moons already. "It can't be long till Blue Star gives you your warrior name," he meowed, trying to sound encouraging. "Why do you think it's taking it so long?" Sandpaw asked, turning her pale green eyes on Fireheart. "I don't know," he admitted. "Blue Star's been ill, and there's River Clan and Shadow Clan causing trouble. I guess she's got other things on her mind." "You'd think she'd need more warriors than ever," meowed Sandpaw. Fireheart felt a stab of sympathy. "I suppose. She's just waiting for the right time." He knew it didn't sound very helpful, but it was all he could think to say. "Maybe by New Leaf?" Sandpaw sighed. "When do you think you'll get a new apprentice?" "Blue Star hasn't said anything yet. Perhaps she'll give you Cloudkit when he's old enough." "I hope so." Fireheart stared across the clearing at the nursery, wondering if Yellowfang had finished treating Cloudkit, if he makes it that far. "Of course he'll make it," Soundpaw meowed confidently. "But he has a fever." Fireheart let his shoulders sag with worry. "All kits get fevers," Sandpaw retorted. "With his thick fur, he'll recover in no time. That coat's going to be handy in Leaf Bear, perfect for hunting in the snow. The prey'll never see him coming, and he'll be able to stay out twice as long as thin pelts like Longtail." Fireheart purred and felt himself relax. Sandpaw had lifted his spirits again. He stood up and gave her a brisk lick on the head. "Come on," he meowed. "Blue Star is calling the cats for the gathering." They joined the other cats beside the camp entrance, a silent, purposeful group. Blue Star signaled to them with a flick of her tail, then led them through the gorse tunnel and out the ravine. The forest glistened in the cold moonlight as they sprinted toward ford trees. Clouds of breath billowed from Fireheart's muzzle, and the forest floor felt frozen beneath his paws. For the first time since Fireheart had joined the clan, Blue Star didn't hesitate at the ridge above ford trees to prepare herself for the meeting. Instead, her cats followed their leader wordlessly as she plunged straight down the slope into the clearing. Chapter 23. River Clan and Shadow Clan had not yet arrived, but Wind Clan was already there. Tall Star greeted Blue Star with a respectful nod. Fireheart spotted One Whisker and bounded over to meet him. "Hey," he meowed. It had been over 2 moons since he'd last seen the small brown tabby warrior who had battled beside him at the gorge. For the first time in ages, Fireheart recalled White Claw's death and felt the familiar bristle of horror as he pictured the River Clan warrior disappearing beneath the rushing river. "Where's Greystripe?" One Whisker asked. "Is he okay?" Fireheart could see the concern in his eyes that the Wind Clan warrior was thinking about White Claw's death too. "He's fine," Fireheart answered. "He's over there with the others." Fireheart remembered the Wind Clan queen, whose kit he'd helped to carry. "How's Morning Flower?" "Happy to be home," replied One Whisker. "Her kit is growing quickly now." Fireheart purred with pleasure. "The whole clan is well," One Whisker added. He glanced at Fireheart with an amused gleam in his eyes. "It's great to eat rabbit again. I hope I never have to taste another rat as long as I live." Fireheart detected a fresh scent on the night air. River Clan was coming. He could smell Shadow Clan too. He scanned the ridge that ran around the edge of the hollow. Sure enough, River Clan cats were streaming down on one side. On the opposite ridge, Fireheart saw Shadow Clan cats poised at the top, their coats gleaming in the moonlight. The lean figure of Night Star stood at the head of the group. "At last," growled One Whisker. He spotted them as well. "It's too cold to be hanging around tonight." Fireheart nodded absently. He was searching the crowd of River Clan cats as they entered the clearing, looking for Silverstream. He recognized the pale gray she-cat easily. She skidded to a halt at the bottom of the slope and followed her father as he exchanged reserved greetings with the warriors from the other clans. Nervously, Fireheart scanned the growing throng of cats for Greystripe. Would he dare speak to Silverstream tonight? The gray warrior had his back to Silverstream while he talked with a Wind Clan warrior. Fireheart watched Greystripe so closely that he didn't hear Deadfoot approach. Good evening, Fireheart, yelled the Wind Clan deputy. How are you? Fireheart turned. Hello, he meowed. I'm fine, thank you. Deadfoot nodded. Good, he meowed and limped away. One Whisker gave Fireheart a friendly nudge. You're privileged. Fireheart felt a small glimmer of pride. Bluestar's yowl sounded from the great rock. Fireheart turned and looked up, surprised. The leaders didn't usually call the meeting so soon. Crooked Star and Night Star were standing close together on the rock. Blue Star waited beside Tall Star for the cats to gather beneath them. It was the first time Fireheart had seen the Wind Clan leader at the gathering, he realized with the jolt. Fireheart and One Whisker followed the other cats as they settled themselves beneath the rock. Fireheart looked up expectantly, waiting for Blue Star to welcome Tall Star and Wind Clan back, but the Thunder Clan leader was clearly in no mood to waste time on friendly words. River Clan has been hunting at Sunning Rocks, she began angrily. Our patrols have scented your warriors many times, Crooked Star. Sunning Rocks belongs to Thunder Clan. Crooked Star met Blue Star's gaze steadily. Have you forgotten how recently one of our warriors was killed defending our territory from Thunder Clan? You had no need to defend your territory, Blue Star answered. My warriors were not hunting there. They were returning home after finding Wind Clan. It was a mission we all agreed on. According to the warrior code, they should not have been attacked. You speak of the warrior code, spat Crooked Star. What about the Thunder Clan warrior who has been spying on our territory since then? Blue Star was caught off guard. Warrior, she echoed. Have you seen him? No, not yet, Crooked Star hissed. But we find his scent so often, it won't be long before we do. Fireheart glanced at Graystripe in alarm. He knew only too well which warrior had been detected in Crooked Star's territory. Would any of the River Clan warriors recognize his scent tonight? Graystripe sat motionless, not taking his eyes off the leaders on the great rock. Tiger Claw's deep growl sounded from the crowd. We have scented Shadow Clan in our territory as well as River Clan this past moon. And not just one warrior, but a whole patrol, always the same cats. The Shadow Clan leader's eyes flashed indignantly. Shadow Clan has not been in your territory. Clearly your warriors can't tell the difference in scents of cats outside their own clan. You've been smelling the scent of rogue cats. They have been stealing prey from our territory as well. Tiger Claw snorted in disbelief, and Night Star glared down at him. Do you doubt the word of Shadow Clan, Tiger Claw? The crowd murmured uncomfortably as Tiger Claw stared back at Night Star with unconcealed distrust. For the first time, Tall Star spoke, his tail twitching uncertainly. My warriors have also found strange scents in Wind Clan territory. They seem to be Shadow Clan. I knew it, Tiger Claw snarled. River Clan and Shadow Clan have united against us. Us? What do you mean by us? Spat Crooked Star. I think it's you and Wind Clan that have formed the alliance. Is that why you were so keen to bring them back, so you could use them to invade the rest of the forest? Tall Star's fur bristled. That's not why we returned, and you know it. We have kept to our own hunting grounds these past moons. Then why have we found strange warrior scents in our territory? Crooked Star growled. They don't belong to Wind Clan, hissed Tall Star. They must be rogue cats, as Night Star says, but rogue cats would be convenient excuse for invading our territories, would they not? Blue Star murmured. He stared dangerously at the River Clan and Shadow Clan leaders. Crooked Star raised his hackles, and Night Star arched his back. With a flash of alarm, Fireheart saw Tiger Claw stand up and stalk toward the great rock, every muscle tense. Would the leaders really fight at a gathering? At the moment a shadow fell over the valley, the cats fell silent as they were plunged into blackness. Fireheart looked up, trembling. The cloud had covered the full moon, completely blocking out its light. StarClan has sent the darkness. Fireheart recognized the meow of Halftail, a ThunderClan elder. The Shadow Clan medicine cat yowled in agreement. StarClan is angry. These meetings are meant to be held in peace. Running Nose is right. It was Yellowfang. We shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves, especially during Leaf Bear. We should be worrying about keeping our clan safe. Her voice echoed in the frightened silence. We must listen to StarClan. Chapter 24. Tallstar spoke up, a dim silhouette on top of the great rock. This gathering is over by the will of StarClan, the crowd murmured in agreement. The air was thick with the sense of fear and hostility. Come, ThunderClan. Fireheart could barely see Bluestar as she leapt down from the great rock and headed for the edge of the clearing. He pushed his way through the other cats and hurried after her. He saw the massive outline of Tigerclaw as the deputy fell in step beside his leader, and the pale gray shapes of the other ThunderClan cats as they gathered behind the two great warriors. No cat spoke as they trekked solemnly up the slope toward home. Fireheart glanced over his shoulder. The other clans were withdrawing too. By the time he reached the top of the slope, Four Trees was deserted. The clan ran silently through the forest, following the familiar scent-line trail. Fireheart spotted Graystripe at the back, and he slowed his pace. Maybe Graystripe would be more prepared to talk about Silverstream now that it was clear how tense things were between the clans. His scent had been detected in RiverClan territory. Graystripe was putting himself and the clan in danger with his secret meetings. Fireheart searched for the right words, but Graystripe hissed first. "I know what you're going to say, and I won't stop seeing her." "You're a mouse-brained fool," Fireheart spat back. "They'll soon work out it's you. Bluestar will guess, or some cat from RiverClan will recognize your scent. Tigerclaw's probably already guessed." Graystripe shot Fireheart an anxious glance. "Do you really think so?" "I don't know," Fireheart admitted, relieved to hear a note of fear in Graystripe's voice. Graystripe had been acting as if he had no idea what might happen if the clan found out about his affair. But once he starts thinking about it... Okay, spat Graystripe. He was silent for a moment. "What if I promise we'll meet only at Four Trees? That way our scent will be hard to detect, and I won't have to go into RiverClan territory. Will you leave me alone then?" Fireheart felt his heart sink. Graystripe was not going to give up Silverstream that easily. Then he nodded. This had to be better than creeping into hostile clan territory to see her. "Satisfied?" Graystripe's eyes flashed in the gloom, but his voice sounded shaky. Fireheart felt a pang of regret for his lost friendship and a rush of sympathy for the Grey Warrior. He stretched his head forward to nuzzle Graystripe's flank, but Graystripe ran on ahead, leaving Fireheart alone at the back of the group. Even though the cats were tired from the journey, Bluestar called a meeting as soon as they were home. Most of the clan was still awake anyway. The gathering had been shorter than usual, and the sudden cloud cover had alarmed even the cats left in the camp. While Bluestar and Tigerclaw settled themselves on High Rock, Fireheart hurried over to the nursery. He wanted to know how loud Kit was. He poked his head through the entrance. It was pitch black and warm inside. "Hello, Fireheart," Brindleface whispered, a faint shadow shifting in the gloom. "Cloudkit's much better. Yellowfang gave him feverfew." "It was just a chill." The Queen sounded relieved. "What happened at the gathering?" StarClan sent clouds to cover the moon. Bluestar's called a meeting. Can you come?" Fireheart listened to Brindleface sniffing her kits. "Yes, I think I can," she answered finally. "My kits will sleep for a while." Fireheart withdrew his head, and together they joined the cats gathering in the clearing. Fireheart felt fur brush against him, and Cinderpaw glanced up at him with wide, worried eyes. Bluestar had already begun. "The greatest threat seems to be from RiverClan and ShadowClan. We must prepare for the possibility that these two clans have united against us." Shocked meows rippled through the clan. "Do you really think they've joined together?" Yellowfang rasped. "RiverClan has the best sources of prey, but I can't imagine they'd want to share with ShadowClan." Fireheart remembered Silverstream's words about RiverClan's hunger after the two-leg invasion, but he held his tongue, fearful that Bluestar would want to know where he'd heard such a story. "They didn't deny it," Tigerclaw pointed out. Bluestar nodded. "Whatever the truth, we must be on full alert. From tonight, each patrol will have 4 cats, at least 3 of them warriors. The patrols will be more frequent, 2 each night, and 1 during the day, as well as the dawn and dusk patrols. We must put a stop to RiverClan and ShadowClan's raids on our territory, and since they have chosen to ignore our words, we must be prepared to fight." The clan yowled in agreement. Fireheart joined in, even though he was worried about what this open hostility might mean for Graystripe. He looked around at the other cats. He could see all their eyes shining, except Graystripe's. The Grey Warrior sat with his head bowed in the shadows at the edge of the clearing. When the noise died away, Bluestar spoke again. "The first patrol will leave before dawn." She jumped down from the high rock. Tigerclaw followed, and the rest of the clan broke up into small groups. Fireheart could hear them murmuring nervously as he padded to the warrior's den. Fireheart settled into his nest, kneading the moss with his paws to make it comfortable. An owl hooted at the top of the ravine. He knew he would not sleep yet. His mind was racing with the accusations that had flown around the gathering. He understood RiverClan's anger. They had picked up the scent of ThunderClan cats in their territory, and they were hungry now that their prey had been depleted by the two-leg invasion. But what about ShadowClan? It was smaller since the ThunderClan had helped them to chase out their tyrannical former leader and his band of followers. Broken Star had even admitted to killing Ragged Star, his own father, to become clan leader, but the clan had been left in peace to recover from Broken Star's bloody rule. And Fireheart couldn't help thinking that, with fewer mouths to feed, ShadowClan had no need to raid ThunderClan's hunting grounds, or anyone else's. As he puzzled over these thoughts, Whitestorm and Darkstripe pushed their way into the den. Before Whitestorm went to his nest, he stopped beside Fireheart. "You're to join me with Sandpaw and Mousefur on patrol at Sunhigh," he meowed. "Yes, Whitestorm," Fireheart answered before resting his chin on his paws. He had to get some sleep. His clan needed him to be fit and ready to fight. The clouds that had covered the moon had rolled away by the next morning. Fireheart enjoyed the faint warmth of the sun on his back as he washed himself in the clearing. Cloudkit jumped out of the nursery entrance opposite him, looking bright and happy. Fireheart thanked StarClan that he had recovered so quickly. Sandpaw had been right about the kit's resilience. He looked around to see if Longtail and Dustpaw were there to see it too, but the clearing was empty. Fireheart crossed over to the nursery. "Hi, Cloudkit," he meowed. "Feeling better?" "Yep," squeaked Cloudkit. He spun around in a circle, grasping for his tail with tiny jaws. A small ball of moss that had been sticking to his fur fell off and rolled along the ground. Cloudkit leapt on it and pawed it into the air. It bounced onto the ground beside Fireheart. Fireheart knocked it back toward the kit, and Cloudkit sprang up to catch it in his teeth. "Well done," Fireheart was impressed. With one paw, he scooped the moss ball high into the air, sending it flying across the clearing. Cloudkit raced after the moss and grabbed it. He rolled onto his back, threw the ball up with his paws, and kicked it away with his hind legs. It landed next to the nursery. Cloudkit scrambled up and scooted after it. He crouched a rabbit leap away, his hindquarters bunched in the air. Fireheart watched as the kit prepared to pounce. Suddenly his fur prickled. A long, dark foreleg was reaching toward the moss ball from behind the nursery. "Cloudkit," Fireheart called. "Wait!" Shadowy images of rogue cats were still fresh in his mind. Cloudkit sat up and looked around him, puzzled. Tigerclaw emerged from behind the kitten, holding the moss ball between his teeth. He carried the ball over to the kit and dropped it by Cloudkit's fluffy white paws. "Be careful," he growled. "You wouldn't want to lose such a precious plaything." As he spoke, the Dark Warrior stared at Fireheart over Cloudkit's head. Fireheart shivered. What did Tigerclaw mean by that? He seemed to be talking about the moss ball, but did he really mean that Cloudkit was a plaything? An image of Cinderpaw flashed into Fireheart's mind, a wounded huddle beside the thunder path. Was that another plaything he had lost? A cold feeling of dread seeped into his heart once more he wondered if the ThunderClan deputy was somehow responsible for his apprentice's accident. Chapter 25. "Cloudkit!" Fireheart heard Brindleface calling from inside the nursery. Tigerclaw turned and patted away. Cloudkit gave the moss ball a final shove and ran over to the nursery entrance. "Bye, Fireheart," he mewed before he disappeared inside. Fireheart looked up at the sky. It was almost sun-high, time to join his patrol. He was hungry, but no fresh kill had been gathered yet. Perhaps he might find something while they were out. He hurried across the clearing and out through the gorse tunnel, frozen leaves crunching between his paws. Sandpaw and Mousefur were already waiting at the foot of the slope. Fireheart raised his tail in greeting, unexpectedly happy to see Sandpaw. "Hi," meowed Sandpaw. Mousefur nodded to him. Whitestorm emerged from the gorse tunnel. "Is the Dawn Patrol back yet?" "No sign of them," answered Mousefur, but as she spoke, Fireheart heard the rustle of undergrowth above them. Out of the bushes came Willowpelt, Runningwind, Darkstripe, and Dustpaw. We've patrolled the entire River Clan border, Willowpelt reported. No sign of any hunting parties so far. Blue Star's patrol will check the area again this afternoon. Good, replied Whitestorm. We'll take the Shadow Clan border. Hopefully they'll have the same good sense as River Clan and stay away, meowed Darkstripe. After last night, they must know we'll be looking out for them. I hope so, growled Whitestorm. He turned to his patrol. Are you ready? Fireheart nodded. Whitestorm flicked the tip of his tail and leapt outway into the bracken. Fireheart followed Mousefur and Whitestorm. They kept up a fast pace as they climbed out of the ravine. Sandpaw was right behind Fireheart. He could feel her warm breath as she scrambled up the boulders. They had not even reached Snake Rocks when Fireheart picked up a sinister, familiar scent. He opened his mouth to warn the others, but Mousefur spoke first. Shadow Clan. The four cats stopped to smell the rank stench. I can't believe they've already come back, Sandpaw murmured. Fireheart noticed the fur quiver along her spine. The scent is recent. Whitestorm's eyes glittered with fury. I had hoped Nightstar might bring some honor to his clan, but I suppose the cold winds beyond the Thunderpath blow over every Shadow Cat's heart. Fireheart turned away and began pushing his way into a thick patch of bracken. He rubbed his teeth along the fronds to pick up the scent that hung there. It was Shadow Clan, all right. The smell was familiar, very familiar. Fireheart paused. The scent belonged to a Shadow Clan warrior he had encountered before, but which one? Fireheart pushed onward, hoping more scent markers might jog his memory. Now he could smell something else. Fireheart looked down. On the ground among the bracken stems lay a pile of rabbit bones. Clan cats normally buried the bones of their prey as a sign of respect for the life they had taken. Suddenly aware of what this might mean, Fireheart picked up a mouthful and wove back through the bracken. He dropped them at Whitestorm's paws. Whitestorm stared at the bones in fury. Rabbit bones. The warriors who left these want us to know they've been hunting in our land. Bluestar must know about this immediately. Will she send a battle party against Shadow Clan? Asked Fireheart. He had never seen Whitestorm so angry. She should, as the great white warrior. And I'll lead it myself if I can. Nightstar has betrayed our trust, and StarClan knows he must be punished. Bluestar, Whitestorm flung the rabbit bones down in the middle of the camp clearing. Bluestar is already left on patrol, Tigerclaw told him, stepping out from the shadows. Halftail and Frostfur came hurrying from their dens to find out what was going on. Whitestorm stared at Tigerclaw, still furious. Look at this. He spat. Tigerclaw didn't need to be told what they meant. Their scent carried the whole story. His eyes began to burn with anger. Fireheart hung back at the edge of the clearing and watched the two great warriors. The evidence was certainly ominous, but the discovery of the bones had filled his mind with questions, not anger. It was only 3 moons since ShadowClan had driven out their cruel leader with the help of ThunderClan. How could that same clan possibly be ready to risk war with ThunderClan? Tigerclaw clearly had no such doubts. Already he was calling Darkstripe and Running Wind to him. Willowpelt and Mousefur, will you join us too? He announced. We'll find a Shadow Clan patrol and lead them with some wounds that'll remind them to keep out of our territory in the future. Whitestorm nodded. Can I come? Sandpaw meowed. She had been pacing excitedly behind the white warrior. Now she stopped and looked at him with glittering eyes. Not this time, Whitestorm told her. Frustration flicked across her face. But what about Fireheart? She meowed. He found the bones. Tigerclaw narrowed his eyes, his hackles raised. Fireheart can stay here and tell Bluestar when she arrives, he hissed contemptuously. You're going to leave before she gets back? Fireheart asked. Of course, Tigerclaw spat. This needs to be settled now. He turned to Whitestorm and flicked his tail. Fireheart watched as the two warriors charged out of the camp, Darkstripe, Willowpelt, Running Wind, and Mousefur close behind. He could hear their paws pounding the frozen earth as they headed for the side of the ravine. Fireheart was suddenly aware how empty the camp was as Frostfur and Halftail came forward and began sniffing the rabbit bones. He meowed. Who went with Bluestar? Frostfur looked up. Greystripe, Longtail, and Swiftpaw. A cold wind ruffled Fireheart's fur. He hoped that was what made him shiver. He was the only warrior left in camp. Will you check the apprentice's den to see if Dustpaw's there? Fireheart asked Sandpaw. She nodded, bounded across the clearing, and poked her head into the den. He's there, she called back, ducking out again, asleep, with Brackenpaw. Yellowfang came padding out of her den and lifted her head. Fireheart relaxed a little, the familiar sight of the old medicine cat. He narrowed his eyes, ready to greet her. But as Yellowfang tasted the air, her eyes clouded with fear. With slow, stiff steps, she approached the rabbit bones and carefully sniffed each one. Fireheart watched her, wondering why she was so interested in the old bones. At last she looked up and stared into Fireheart's eyes. "Broken Star," she rasped in a voice choked with horror. "Broken Star," Fireheart echoed. Then it hit him. That was why the scent in the bracken had been so familiar. It was Broken Star's scent. "Are you sure?" he meowed urgently. "Tiger Claw has already left for Shadow Clan territory." "Shadow Clan isn't to blame for this," cried Yellowfang. "This is Broken Star and his old warrior friends. I was Shadow Clan's medicine cat. I was there at their kidding. I know their sense as well as I know my own." She paused. "He must find Tiger Claw and stop him. He will be making a terrible mistake if he attacks them." The blood roared in Fireheart's ears, making him dizzy. What should he do? "I'm the only warrior left," he meowed breathlessly to Yellowfang. "What if Broken Star attacks the camp while I'm gone?" "He's done it before. He might have left the bones as a trap so that our camp was left unguarded. You must tell Tiger Claw before he..." Yellowfang pleaded, but Fireheart shook his head. "I can't leave you all alone." "Then I shall go," Yellowfang hissed. "No, I'll go," meowed Sandpaw. Fireheart looked from one cat to the other. He couldn't afford to send either. Their strength and training were needed here to protect the clan. But Yellowfang was right. Innocent blood couldn't be shed. Broken Star was the invader here. ThunderClan had no quarrel with Shadow Clan. He would have to send another cat. He closed his eyes and thought hard. The answer came in a moment. "Brackenpaw," Fireheart hissed, opening his eyes wide. He called the apprentice's name out loud. The young cat pushed his way out of his den and padded across the clearing toward Fireheart. "What is it?" he asked, blinking the sleep from his eyes. "I have an urgent mission for you," Fireheart told him. Brackenpaw shook himself and stood taller. "Yes, Fireheart?" he mewed. "You must find Tiger Claw. He's taking a raiding party to attack a Shadow Clan patrol. Stop him and tell him that it was Broken Star who has been invading our territory." Brackenpaw's eyes widened with alarm, but Fireheart went on. "You might have to cross the Thunder Path. I know you haven't been trained." Images of Cinderpaw's broken body flashed in Fireheart's mind, but he forced them away. He looked deep into Brackenpaw's eyes. "You must find Tiger Claw," he repeated, "or there will be a war between the clans for no reason." Brackenpaw nodded, his eyes calm and filled with purpose. "I'll find him." "I'll find him," the tabby apprentice promised. "May StarClan go with you," Fireheart murmured, reaching forward to touch Brackenpaw's flank with his nose. Brackenpaw turned and sprinted out through the gorse tunnel. Fireheart watched him go, struggling to keep calm. Cinderpaw, the Thunder Path, the images kept flashing back. Fireheart shook his head to clear it. There was no time to worry. If Broken Star was in ThunderClan territory, the camp had to prepare for an attack. "What's happening?" Dustpaw had emerged from the apprentice's den. Fireheart glanced at him, ran to the head of the clearing, and scrambled up onto the high rock. The clearing seemed a long way below his trembling legs. He swallowed hard and began the customary call. "Let all cats old enough to..." But the words were taking too long. "The camp is in danger. Come here now," he yelled urgently. The elders and queen rushed from their dens, followed by their kits. They looked bewildered when they saw Fireheart on top of the high rock. Cinderpaw limped out of the fern tunnel and looked up at Fireheart with his strong, bright gaze. When Fireheart saw her, the camp suddenly stopped swaying beneath him. "What's going on?" demanded One Eye, the oldest ThunderClan cat. "What do you think you're doing up there?" Fireheart didn't hesitate. "Broken Star is back. He might be in ThunderClan territory right now. All our other warriors are out of the camp. If Broken Star attacks, we must be ready. Kits and elders stay in the nursery. The rest of you must be ready for a fight." A menacing yowl from the camp entrance cut short Fireheart's speech. A lean, dark brown tabby with matted fur and torn ears strode into the camp. His bristling tail was bent in the middle like a broken branch. "Broken Star," Fireheart gasped, instinctively unsheathing his claws as every hair on his body stood on end. 4 mangy warriors prowled in behind them, their leader, their eyes glaring with hatred. "So you're the only warrior left," Broken Star hissed, his lips drawn back in a snarl. "This will be easier than I thought." Chapter 26. Yellowfang, Dustpaw, and Sandpaw rushed forward in a defensive row, and the queens lined up behind them. Fireheart saw Cinderpaw hobbling to join them, but Dustpaw spat angrily at the small gray cat as she neared, and Cinderpaw scrambled clumsily away, ears flat, back into Yellowfang's den. The elders grabbed the kits, bundled them into the nursery, and squeezed inside after them. Brindleface picked up Cloudkit in her jaws and pushed him in last. She tugged at the brambles with her paws, ignoring the thorns, and covered the entrance before turning to join the rest of her clan in the clearing. Fireheart leapt down from the high rock and raced to Yellowfang's side. He arched his back and hissed at Broken Star. "You lost the last time we fought, and you'll lose again." "Never," Broken Star spat back. "You might have taken my clan away from me, but you can't kill me. I have more lives than you. One ThunderClan life is worth 10 of yours," Fireheart growled. He gave a warrior's yowl, and the clearing exploded into battle. Fireheart leapt straight for Broken Star and grasped the dark brown tabby with his claws. Life as an outlaw had treated the former clan leader harshly. Fireheart could feel the ribs and the flea-bitten Tom beneath his fur. But Broken Star was still strong. He twisted around and sank his teeth into Fireheart's hind leg. Fireheart yowled and hissed with rage, but kept his grip. Broken Star struggled forward, scrambling with his paws on the frozen ground. Fireheart felt his claws rake alongside Broken Star's bony flanks as the rogue warrior ripped himself free. Fireheart lunged after him, but other claws were grasping at his hind leg. He looked over his shoulder to see who it was, Clawface, crouched there staring at Fireheart with narrow, mocking eyes. Fireheart looked back at him in disbelief. He had never expected to see this cat again. He forgot Broken Star instantly. It was Clawface who had killed Spotted Leaf 6 moons ago. He had murdered the ThunderClan medicine cat in cold blood so that Broken Star could steal Frostfur's kits. Rage roared in Fireheart's ears as he twisted around and threw himself on the top of the scrawny brown Tom. Fireheart glimpsed a flash of the tortoiseshell fur out of the corner of his eyes, and the sweet scent of Spotted Leaf hit the roof of his mouth. He felt her spirit beside him. She had come to help him avenge her death. Fireheart hardly noticed the pain in his leg as he tore it free from Clawface's grasp and flew at him. The Tom reared up and flailed his wide front paws. The thorn-sharp claws caught Fireheart behind his ear. Pain ripped through him like fire, and he staggered. Clawface was on him in an instant, pinning Fireheart to the ground and sinking his teeth into the back of his neck. Fireheart screeched in agony. "Help me, Spotted Leaf, I can't do it." Suddenly the weight was wrenched off his back. Fireheart sprang to his paws and spun around. Graystripe. The gray warrior stood motionless, his eyes filled with horror. Clawface's body hung limply from his jaws. Graystripe opened his mouth, and Clawface fell to the ground, dead. Fireheart took a step forward. He killed Spotted Leaf, Graystripe. There was no time for remorse. "Is Blue Star with you?" he went on urgently. Graystripe shook his head. "She sent me back to fetch Tiger Claw," he replied. "We found bones." Blue Star recognized Broken Star's stench and guessed he might be leading the rogue cats. A hiss sounded nearby, and 2 cats crashed into Fireheart. He leapt out of the way. It was Frostfur battling with another of the attacking cats. The queen was fighting with all the power of StarClan. These were the cats who had stolen her kits. Hate shone in her eyes as she struggled. Fireheart held himself back. Frostfur didn't need his help. A moment later, the rogue warrior was sent screeching away through the bracken camp wall. Frostfur chased after him, but Fireheart called her back. "You have given him enough wounds to remember you." The queen skidded to a halt by the bracken wall and turned, her sides heaving, and her white fur was stained with the enemy's blood. Another rogue warrior screeched past Fireheart and headed for the camp wall. Dustpaw chased after him and managed to give the mottled tabby a fierce bite before he let him scramble out of the camp. Only Broken Star and 1 warrior left, Fireheart thought. Sandpaw had the rogue warrior pinned to the ground. The Tom was lying motionless beneath her. Watch out, thought Fireheart, remembering his favorite trick of letting an enemy think he had won. But Sandpaw was not deceived. When the Tom leapt to his paws, she was ready. She sprang off him and then lunged, grasping the warrior with her claws to flip him over and rake his belly with her hind legs. Only when he squealed like a kit did she let go. The rogue tore out of the camp entrance, still wailing. There was an eerie moment of stillness. The ThunderClan cat stood in silence and stared at the blood and fur that was scattered around the clearing. In the middle lay Clawface's body. Where was Broken Star? Fireheart spun around in alarm, scanning the camp. Could he have broken into the nursery? was about to spring toward the bramble den when a wretched howl from Yellowfang's den tore the air. Fireheart tore across the fern tunnel. Cinderpaw. He raced into the den, expecting the worst, but saw instead Brokenstar lying in a heap on the ground. The old medicine cat stood over him. Brokenstar's eyes were closed and bloody. Fireheart saw his sides heave once and stop moving. He recognized from the deep stillness in the rogue warrior's body that Brokenstar was losing a life. Yellowfang's claws were unsheathed and glistened red. Her face was twisted and her eyes glazed. Suddenly, Brokenstar gasped and began to breathe again. Fireheart waited for Yellowfang to lunge at him with another killing bite, but she hesitated. Brokenstar didn't get up. Fireheart ran to the medicine cat's side. Is that his last life? Why don't you finish him off? He urged. He murdered his father, banished you from your clan, and tried to kill you. It's not his last life, she rasped, and even if it were, I couldn't kill him. Why not? StarClan would honor you for it. Fireheart could not believe her words. The name Brokenstar had always made this old she-cat bristle with rage. Yellowfang dragged her gaze from Brokenstar and looked at Fireheart, her eyes clouded with pain and grief as she murmured, He's my son. Fireheart felt the ground lurch under his paws. But medicine cats are forbidden from having kits, he blurted out. I know, answered Yellowfang. I never intended to have kits, but then I fell in love with Ragged-Star. Her voice was thick with sorrow. Suddenly, Fireheart thought back to the battle when Brokenstar was driven out of ShadowClan camp. Just before he fled, the cruel leader had told Yellowfang that he had murdered his father. Yellowfang had been devastated, and now Fireheart understood why. There were 3 kits in my litter, Yellowfang went on, but only Brokenstar survived. I gave him to a ShadowClan queen to bring her up as her own. I thought that losing 2 of my kits was punishment from StarClan for breaking the warrior code, but I was wrong. My punishment wasn't that 2 of my kits died, it was that this one survived. Yellowfang looked in disgust at Brokenstar's bleeding body. And now I cannot kill him. I must accept my fate, as StarClan wishes. Yellowfang staggered, and Fireheart thought she was going to collapse. He pressed his body against her flank to support her and whispered, Does he know you're his mother? Yellowfang shook her head. Brokenstar began to wail pitifully. I can't see! Fireheart realized with horror that the rogue cat's eyes had been scratched beyond repair. Fireheart cautiously approached him. Brokenstar lay still. Fireheart poked him with a forepaw, and Yellowfang's son moaned again. Don't kill me, he whined. Fireheart backed away, feeling a shudder of revulsion at the warrior's fear. Yellowfang took a deep breath. I will see to him. She walked over to her wounded son, grasped him by the scruff of his neck, and dragged him to the nest that Patchpelt had left. Fireheart let her go. He wanted to check that Cinderpaw was all right. He caught sight of the dark shape moving inside the split rock where Yellowfang slept. Cinderpaw, he called. Cinderpaw poked her head out. Are you okay? Fireheart asked. Have the rogue cats gone? She whispered. Yes, except Brokenstar. He's badly injured. Yellowfang seeing to him. He waited for Cinderpaw's shocked reaction, but she just shook her head slowly and stared at the ground. Are you okay? Fireheart repeated. I should have fought alongside you. Cinderpaw's voice was choked with shame. You would have been killed. That's what Dustpaw said. He told me to go and hide with the kits. The small cat's eyes were full of despair. But I wouldn't have minded being killed. What good am I like this? I'm just a burden on this clan. Fireheart felt a thorn-sharp pang of pity. He searched for words to comfort her, but before he could speak, Yellowfang's rasping mew sounded from the bracken. Cinderpaw, she clawed. Fetch me some cobwebs, quickly. Cinderpaw turned at once and disappeared into the rock, returning a moment later with one paw wrapped in a swath of cobwebs. As quickly as she could, she scrambled awkwardly over to Yellowfang and thrust the cobwebs inside the nest. Now, get me some of that comfrey root, ordered Yellowfang. As Cinderpaw limped back to the split rock, Fireheart turned to leave. There was nothing more he could do here. He must find out how the rest of the clan was. Hardly any cat had moved in the camp clearing. Fireheart padded straight to Dustpaw and meowed. Yellowfang is tending to Brokenstar's wounds. Cinderpaw is helping her. He ignored Dustpaw's gasp of disbelief. Go and guard him. Dustpaw ran to the tunnel and disappeared inside. Fireheart went over to Greystripe. The Grey Warrior was still staring at Clawface's body. You saved my life, Fireheart murmured. Thank you. Greystripe lifted his gaze to Fireheart. I would give my life for you, he answered simply. Feeling choked, Fireheart watched his friend turn and walk away. Perhaps their friendship was not over after all. sound of paws pounding through the gorse tunnel broke into his thoughts. Bluestar came rushing into the camp, followed by Longtail and Swiftpaw. Fireheart felt his shoulders droop with relief at the sight of his clan leader. She looked around at the blood-spattered clearing, her eyes wide until her gaze rested on Clawface's body. Brokenstar attacked, she meowed. Fireheart nodded. Is he dead? He's with Yellowfang, Fireheart answered, forcing out the words in spite of his exhaustion. He's been wounded, his eyes. And the other rogue warriors? We chased them off. Are any of our clan badly hurt? Bluestar demanded, looking at once more around the clearing. The cats shook their heads. Good, she meowed. Sandpaw, Swiftpaw, take this body out of the camp and bury it. No elders need to be present. No rogue deserves to be buried with the honor of StarClan ritual. Swiftpaw and Sandpaw began to drag Clawface toward the tunnel. Are the elders safe? Bluestar asked. They're in the nursery, Fireheart told her. As he spoke, a rustling sound from the bramble den. A rustling sounded from the bramble den, and Halftail appeared, followed by the other kits and elders. Fireheart saw Cloudkit tumble out and scamper excitedly across the clearing to Brindleface. She greeted him with a brisk lick, and the kit turned to watch Clawface's body as it disappeared away through the tunnel. Is he dead? Cloudkit asked curiously. Can I go and see? Hush, whispered Brindleface, tucking her tail around him. Where's Tigerclaw? Bluestar asked. He's taken a party to attack a ShadowClan patrol, Fireheart explained. We found bones on our patrol. They smelled of ShadowClan, so Tigerclaw decided to attack. I sent Brackenpaw to stop him when Yellowfang realized it was Brokenstar's scent on them. Brackenpaw? Meowed Bluestar, narrowing her eyes. Even though he might have to cross the Thunderpath. I was the only warrior left in camp. There was no one else I could send. Bluestar nodded, the concern in her eyes giving way to understanding. You didn't want to leave the camp unguarded, she meowed. You did well, Fireheart. I think Brokenstar hoped to lure all our warriors away from the camp. We found bones, too. Greystripe told me. Fireheart looked around for his friend, but Greystripe had disappeared. Send Yellowfang to me, but when she's finished with Brokenstar, Bluestar ordered. She pricked her ears at the noise of more paws in the gorse tunnel. Tigerclaw came racing into the camp, followed by Whitestorm and the rest of the raiding party. Fireheart craned his neck to peer around the warriors until he saw Brackenpaw right at the back. The young apprentice looked exhausted but unhurt. Fireheart let out a quiet sigh of relief. Did Brackenpaw reach you before you found a patrol? Asked Bluestar, walking over to her deputy. We hadn't even entered their territory, Tigerclaw answered. We were just about to cross the Thunderpath. He narrowed his eyes. Was that Clawface they were burying? Bluestar nodded. Then Brackenpaw was right, meowed the deputy. Brokenstar was planning to attack the camp. Is he dead too? No, Yellowfang is tending to his wounds. Surely not, Mousefur exclaimed, exchanging a glance with Running Wind beside her. Tigerclaw's face darkened. Tending to his wounds, he snarled. We should kill him, not waste time making him better. We'll discuss that once I've spoken to Yellowfang, meowed Bluestar calmly. You can discuss it with me now, Bluestar. Yellowfang padded into the clearing, her head drooping with exhaustion. Have you left Brokenstar alone? Growled Tigerclaw, his amber eyes flashing. Yellowfang raised her head and looked at the Dark Warrior. Dustpaw is guarding him, and I've given him poppy seeds so he'll sleep for a while. Brokenstar is blind now. Tigerclaw, there is no way he'll try to escape. He'd die of hunger in a week if a fox or a gang of crows didn't kill him first. Well, that makes it easier, Tigerclaw snarled. We won't have to kill him ourselves. We can let the forest deal with him. Yellowfang turned to Bluestar. We cannot let him die, she meowed. Why not? Fireheart held his breath as he watched the leader's eyes flick from Yellowfang to Tigerclaw and back again. He wondered if Yellowfang was going to tell Bluestar that Brokenstar was her son. If we did, we would be no better than he is, replied Yellowfang calmly. Tigerclaw's tail flicked in anger. What do you think, Whitestorm? Bluestar meowed before Tigerclaw could speak. It will be a burden on our clan to look after him, Whitestorm answered thoughtfully. But Yellowfang is right. If we send him out into the forest, or kill him in cold blood, StarClan will know we have stooped as low as he. One Eye stepped forward. Bluestar, she meowed in her croaky old voice. In the past, we have sometimes kept prisoners for many moons. We could do it again. Fireheart remembered that Yellowfang herself had been a prisoner when she first came to the camp. He waited for the medicine cat to remind Bluestar of this, but she said nothing. So, you would really consider keeping this rogue inside our camp? Tigerclaw's eyes blazed with rage as he challenged his leader. With a pang, Fireheart couldn't help agreeing with the Dark Warrior's words. The thought of killing Broken Star appalled him. He knew better than any of these cats what that would mean to Yellowfang, but Broken Star was a fearsome enemy, even without his sight. Keeping him in the camp would be difficult and dangerous for all the members of the clan. Is he really blind? Bluestar asked Yellowfang. Yes, he is. Has he other wounds? Fireheart replied this time. I clawed him pretty bad, he admitted. He looked over to Yellowfang and was relieved when the old she-cat dipped her head just enough for him to know she forgave him for wounding her son. How long till they heal? Asked Bluestar. About a moon, Yellowfang answered. Then you may nurse him till then. After that, we will discuss his future again, and from now on he will be known as Broken Tail, not Broken Star. We cannot take away the lives that Star Clan gave him, but this cat is no longer a clan leader. Bluestar looked questioningly at Tigerclaw. His tail twitched, but he didn't speak. It is decided, Bluestar meowed. He stays. And that is where we will stop for the night. So I hope everyone enjoyed listening. I hope you have a good night, a good evening, and a good night. Till next time, my friends. Take care.